certification called DP500, and this is really good for people who are looking for an architect, um, experience. So this does not only cover Power BI. Essentially, it is focused on Power BI, but it's kind of it covers uh, SQL. It covers data engineering in Synapse. It covers data, the flow of data from Synapse to Power BI, uh, and pretty much the Azure Analytics stack. And it does take into consideration Microsoft Purview as well, which is data governance. So it has that angle as well. So it has analytics, engineering, and governance. So this is really good if you are, being exposed to um, different technology. So if you're kind of a consultant, this would be a good certificate. Essentially, I would say if you're not well versed with Power BI, if most of the people over here, um, if you are not well versed with Power BI, then I would say this would not be the best first certification. This I would say this would be something later. So yeah, maybe go towards the PL 300 and then towards the DP 500. Um,
Thanks for sharing that, Sohail. So I think people
yeah.
who are really interested, maybe they can reach out to you if they need some more insights for the certifications, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Thank you.
Um,
I
yeah.
think we can get started now. We have good enough number. And
Yep.
I've
Cool.
started
Sounds
the
good.
recording as well. Yeah. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Rija. All right. So just let me just have a look at the topics which we are looking to cover. So last time we went through Power BI basics. We went through the use cases, simple reporting using Excel, um, combining multiple Excels from SharePoint to create reports using Power Query. Uh, we saw some basic transformation in Power Query. So I think that session covered. I hope people are comfortable with using Power Query from a user's or from a developer point of view. So ideally, there's just one topic which is left, which is introduction to DAX and creation of measures and calculated columns in DAX. And this is a complex topic. However, before that, I thought maybe I'll just cover a brief of Power BI from what Microsoft kind of portrays it to be. So this is the Power BI website, and I thought maybe I'll just go through this in brief. So essentially, we covered that Power BI is just a reporting platform which sits on top of all your data sources. It brings together data from multitude of sources, and you can perform analytics on top of it. So basically, it's just asking the right questions to your data and getting the best answers out of it. Yeah. So if I'll just give this link, people can actually have a look at the website. It's pretty good from a sales perspective, but yeah, it's even for technical people. It does give some information as well. So why Power BI? I think that was answered in the last session. Copilot in Power BI. No, this is something which is upcoming. I think it's still in preview, but it might come to GA in July this year, as per what Microsoft told. But yeah, they're never on time, so maybe it might come in October or something like that. Essentially, this is ChatGPT for Power BI. So like you can ask ChatGPT questions and you can get answers using generative AI. This is pretty much does the same, but on top of your data inside Power BI. So essentially you can create reports, you can ask it to build measures, calculated columns and a lot more. So it's essentially the GPT models built inside of Power BI. Um, I think this is a little detailed. So essentially Power BI, yeah, before I get into this, cover, yeah, I'll get back to this in a second after I explain two more things. Power BI Pro. So Power BI essentially has licenses. You have the free version, which we are essentially using right now. However, when we are going into a business or any enterprise, then you have to choose a license. Um, and the reason for licenses is over here. So I clicked on pricing, and once we go down, you can essentially see what all you get for your licenses. So over here, you can see that Pro, you can use Power BI Desktop for pretty much everything from free to premium. You can share and collaborate only in Pro and Premium. So if you are touching on Power BI Service, which I'll be explaining in 1 second, you need you need Pro. Essentially, this is just collaboration. This is pretty much GitHub for developers, similar to GitHub for developers. Storage depends on your license. Data security and encryption is available for all. OneLake store, basically your data lake or any lakehouse approach, you need to go for the premium per capacity, which means you have to purchase compute for your Power BI, and essentially that compute will be reserved for your business. This is the most expensive option, and this is what most of the businesses use for a lot of reasons. It's to utilize these features, and also for governance and oversight perspective as well. XML endpoint, this is one important point to cover. So last time we saw the Power BI has different connectors, and these connectors basically help us bring data from multitude of sources into Power BI for performing data analytics. However, when we don't have a connector, you can either use an REST API endpoint, or you can use an XML endpoint. So if your enterprise system or any ERP or pretty much any legacy software which does not have a connector in Power BI, if you want to extract data from it, read or write to that specific software from Power BI, you can use XML endpoint. It essentially stands for Extensive Markup Language Analytics, and it's nothing but reading and writing data in XML format. So that's the gist of it. And that's only available for premium per capacity. Coming back to this, yeah, so talking about the service. All right. I think a lot of people might already know what's Power BI service, but for people who do not know, last time we saw that we opened Power BI desktop, the application. We read data from Excel or from SharePoint or from different sources, and we created reports using that data once it was there in Power BI. But that is not collaborative because that is actually there in your local system. If you want to collaborate, or if you want your users or your customers to use your reports, in that case you have to move to something called service, and this is essentially just a centralized cloud space wherein you can publish reports, you can consume reports, you can collaboratively work on reports and do a lot of other things. I think last time I did publish a report and kind of went through that. You can see it online on app.powerbi.com, and essentially that app.powerbi.com is nothing but your service. So this is the best diagram to explain it. It's a cloud infrastructure wherein you publish, you write, uh, you can connect to different data sources. You can connect to something called Power BI gateways, which is essentially connecting your service to external data stores, and you can access reports from that. So your customers can access it, other developers can access it, and a lot more. And this is also a good diagram which I thought to share. Essentially, is your desktop is what you use for development. Once you publish it, it stays on the service. It's a centralized cloud store, and you can connect to different sources as well, like SQL, MongoDB, Hadoop, and other stuff. Now coming back to the pricing. So over here, once you have premium, and essentially this is the best access, this is the best license you can get. And there's something called premium capacity. So just this is very important. Essentially, this you'll get to know once you actually work on a project or something. Right? But one important thing is premium per capacity. So if you just go to app.powerbi.com, you are actually on a shared resource inside of Microsoft ecosystem. However, when your business wants a separate infrastructure for your own Power BI analytics needs, in that case, you have to purchase something called premium per capacity. And this is premium per capacity. So basically, it's your own infrastructure inside of which there is specialized Power BI for your business. And once you purchase premium per capacity, you have to purchase a specific license for individual users. And this depends on what the user is going to do. So if the user is going to develop reports, then the pro license would do the job. But if they have to do advanced activities, then we need a premium license for that specific user. Yeah, and this is pretty much the high level gist of this. This is pretty advanced, but I thought I'll just cover this. Now coming back to Fabric. So initially, you had app.powerbi.com, which is your Power BI service, and all your data engineering used to be done on other technologies like Azure Synapse or Azure Databricks or any other infrastructure. And the underlying data store would be your lakehouse or your data lake inside of Azure. So Microsoft own all this. They own the data store, which is your data lake. They own the engineering stuff, which is Synapse. They don't own Databricks, but they have partnered with Databricks. And they own the analytics stack, which is Power BI. So this is a Microsoft product. So essentially, they were like, why do we need to work in silos? Let's actually combine everything and bring all the workloads together. And that's where Fabric came into picture. So essentially, this is one place for doing all your activities from data engineering, analytics to your data science and machine learning. And this is the high level stuff. This is still in preview. It's still not in production. So yeah, it's yet to come. All right. I think yeah, this I can go for hours talking on this, but yeah, please feel free to have a look at this. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll help you out with this. So yep, we have covered the service. We have covered what it does on a high level. Now let's get into today's main topic, which is DAX. So for that, I need to open a Power BI desktop. All right. So similar to last time, I've just opened Power BI desktop, and today I'm going to create a new report. So rather than using the existing data set, I thought I'll actually take some new data set from the internet to make it a little easier. So yeah, I have a couple of Excel files from which I will be creating a table. And similar to last time, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat, or yeah, maybe feel free to unmute and just pause. All right. So I have a couple of Excel workbooks. I am going to connect it. I will give you these data sources as well for you to play around with later on. So I have three files. One is cookie. I think I'm not sharing the entire screen, so maybe I'll just share the entire screen for a minute or two now. All right. So I'm just extracting data from Excel files inside my desktop. So you can see that the first is cookie type. So this is a Excel file with 2 sheets. I need this data. And I think last time someone asked if you can transform, do you need to transform data or load data? In this case, I'm going to load it directly because I know that the data set is clean. I don't have any activities to do on this data. However, I think by now everyone should know that transform data opens Power Query on which you can do other data transformations or any kind of transformations on the data or any manipulations on the data set. So let me load this data. And once I load this data, this has to be visible on the data section. It's creating a connection, and then it extracts the data set, it compresses it, and it stores it inside of your Power BI file, which is your PBX file. Similar to this, I am going to extract 2 more data. So I need Excel workbook. Uh, I've taken cookie types. Let me take in customers. All right, so this, I need the customer sheet. This is the one. Let me load it. I know that this data set is clean as well. I do not need any transformation activities on this. So I'm going to load this in Power BI. And I'm going to get third data set, which is same. It's an Excel workbook. And I need the orders. Let me select the sheet which I want. So this is the sheet which I want. And I know this data set is clean as well. So let me load it directly. All right, now that I have loaded this 3 data set, let me share the specific window too. So that is visible to all. Yep, this is the right one. All right. So now that you have seen that I've loaded the three data sets, cookie types, customer, and orders. So let me give a brief explanation of this, because for creating of measures and columns and stuff like that, you should have a rough idea of what this data is. Um, Now, as you know, this is the visual page, so I really can't get an oversight of the data. So to get an oversight of the data, I need to go to the table view, and this is where I can see what the table looks like. Um, so the first table we have is cookie types, and essentially this gives us the type of, so this is basically cookie. You can imagine it's a cookie shop. They sell cookies. So the first table is cookie type, and essentially this gives what type of cookie we are looking at. So we have chocolate chip, we have fortune cookies, oatmeal raisin, and a couple of other more. You see the number of units which have been sold till now. You can see the revenue per cookie. Essentially, that's the amount you get from the customer. And you can see the cost per cookie. That's your manufacturing cost. So this is the cookie table. You have the customers table. So this gives the customer name, the phone number, address, and other information about the customer. And then last, you have the orders table. So this is essentially every order which has been placed till date. Um, now, now that we have an idea of this table, we need to model this data before we can perform any activities on this data, or before we can perform any visualizations or create measures or create columns and anything like that. So for that, we actually go to the model view, and over here, you can see that Power BI has already established a model. So it has already assumed that your orders and customers are related, and you can see that it's related by customer ID. So that's a one-to-many relation. So one customer has multiple orders. Uh, and essentially order is the main table we need. So let me bring that in the center. Um, and you can see that there's no relation between cookie types and orders. So now we need to establish a connection over here. Now from the previous view, you would have seen that the cookie type and the product is actually similar. So let me confirm that. So the cookie type is similar to the product column in the orders. So that's the relation, and that should be a one-to-many. So let me take the cookie type and take it and hit it to the product. And you can see that the relation is established over here as well. And this is a one-to-many relation. All right, so in data modeling, you need to understand that you have facts and dimensions. Your fact table is the main table, the main reference table, and this usually contains transactional data. Transactional data is nothing but similar to a bank transaction, wherein every transaction you do is a row in that specific table. Um, Now the dimensions basically explain that transactions. So say for example, you have a city uh, and you have zip code, and these kind of information which explains that given transaction will be stored in the dimensions. So it's similar to SQL concept, or similar. I'm not sure if it's similar to Excel, but it depends on what business problem we are trying to solve using Excel. But it's similar to the SQL um, concepts, wherein your fact is your main table and the dimensions are it contains data which can explain things in the fact table. So over here you can see that the orders has transactional data. So these are all the orders which were purchased till date, and the cookie types and the customer explain certain stuff in the order. So these are basically your dimensions or your explanation table. So this is your main point of reference, and these are explanation tables. So it's always important to have a star schema, which means there needs to be one fact and multiple dimensions. You should not have multiple fact tables. That creates confusion from a data modeling perspective. And when you're trying to visualize the data as well, it does not help you. So you won't be able to ask the right questions to the data and extract the right answers from your underlying data. So that's important. So over here, because we have three tables, it's pretty simple. We have one fact and two dimension tables. All right, now coming back to the report view. Now that we have established a data model, uh, we can start creating measures. And essentially, before we create a measure is nothing but a calculation which can be done on top of your data. So this could be a mathematical calculation, or it could be a logical calculation, which I'll be showing in a second. So the easiest way to create measure on any specific table is to just right click on the table and you have a new measure over here. And you can do this on any data set or any table inside of Power BI. All right. So now let's start creating measures. Um, so the first measure which we will be creating is the total number of units sold. Um, and that is basically the from the orders table. So I need how many, so I need basically the accumulation of the units sold column. So for example, you can see that chocolate chip on this specific day, there were 292 pieces which were sold. And this was sold for the customer with customer ID 3. And you can see that on Saturday, 1st of February, it was these many units were sold for the same customer, but it was a different order. So I essentially want the number of units sold. So I want to accumulate the number of units. So for that, I right click, I hit on new measure, and you can see that you get this playground wherein you can code a new measure. So essentially, when you hit on this expand to fit, it kind of takes in the full window. But let me just show it on this window. Let me zoom it so that we have an idea. So now I want the total number of units sold. And the way to do that is by summing up the units sold. So you have multiple functions in measures, and this essentially comes with practice. Or you can just go to ChatGPT and tell it that you need to do this so and so. So give me the function, and essentially it gives you the code. Right now I know that sum function helps us. So I hit on sum. There is something called IntelliSense inside of Power BI, which kind of automatically gives you the function. If you want the explanation for it, you can click on read more. And this basically gives you an explanation of what this does. So this adds all the numbers in a column, and that's what we require for now. So I need the sum function. And right now it also gives what all options. So it gives pretty much all the tables and all the columns. And you can select which one you want. I am focusing on the units sold, which is there in the orders column. So I'm looking at the data set on the right hand side and deciding, and that's over here. So the units sold. So I just click on that, and it pretty much gives this, and it also explains that this also shows the syntax. So now that I know that my syntax is correct. So this adds all the numbers in the column, and this is what I want. I close the bracket, hit on enter, and you have your first measure, which is created. So this shows the total number of units sold, which is a measure. Now let's actually visualize this. So let's just drag it and drop it into the playground. And you can see that you have the total number of units sold, which has automatically changed into a bar chart. And you can see that it's around 1,125,000. So that's the number of units which are sold. Let me put this into a matrix, or let me put this into a bar graph for now, and we'll change it later. Now I want the number of units sold, but I want to know which customer it was sold to. So you would have seen that there is a model which is present on the background. So I can actually take data from, I can actually take data features from different tables and insert it into the playground. And Power BI kind of automatically does its stuff, and it tries to create the best possible visualization for us. So I don't want to know which customer we have sold it to. So for that, I target the customers table. And I know that the customer has a name. So I just want to find which customer, um, how many units we have sold in total. So I've just dragged the customer name and put it into the playground. And you can see that it's automatically created a bar chart. So from the graph, you can see that ACME Pites was the customer to which we sold most number of cookies. And that's about 329,000 change cookies. And the least was to Tres Delicious, which is about 128,000. So this is how you create a measure. It's pretty simple, however, it's complicated because yeah, measures becomes complicated with whatever type of calculation you are doing. So right now I have a bar chart. However, I want to create a matrix. So let me just select matrix and it kind of does the job automatically. So over here, you know that the customer name and the total number of units sold. So let's create another, before creating another measure, let's actually try to edit a measure. So if you have already created a measure and you want to edit it, all you have to do is just click on the measure again, and that opens the code, which you can see on the top. And you can essentially change anything. So if you want to change, the name, so if you want to put a new over there, that changes the name and stuff like that. And you can also change the code. And once you change the code, if the syntax is okay, it actually registered into the Power BI. Another way to change the name is just double click on the measure itself, and that essentially helps you to edit the name. So now we have edited the name to a new name. All right, so the next one is, let's create a new measure, and this time let's try to count the number of rows in the orders table. So for that, I go to the orders table, the same thing, right click, new measure. And this time I want the number of orders, and I want the count of it, but I want the count row. So I want the number of rows, and you can see that the IntelliSense gives us what this function does. So it counts the number of rows in a given table, and that's what I want. And I want to count the number of rows in the orders table. The syntax was correct, so it works well. And you can see that the new measure is created, and I'm looking at the right hand side and the data side. So you can see that the number of orders has been created. Essentially, when you don't have the right syntax, it gives you an error, or the measure is not created, or it does not work in that case. So it kind of gives you a red dot stating it's not going to work. Even if you try to commit it, it does not commit. So basically, that helps you in finding whether the syntax was okay or not. All right, we have the number of orders, so let's drag and drop this, and you can see that the total number of orders were around 700. So you have this as well. All right, so the language I'm using over here is called DAX, and that's Data Analytics Expressions. Now, there is documentation in Microsoft for DAX. However, that's huge because it has lots and lots of functions inside of it. And these are essentially the same as Excel functions. So anyone who's coming from an Excel background might already know a lot of this stuff because the underlying engine inside of Power BI for DAX is actually the same as Excel. So yeah, it's not a good idea to learn DAX by reading the document. It's a good idea to actually practice it on different types of data or different types of scenarios you come across. And if you don't know a specific function, the best way is to go to ChatGPT and just ask it that, I need to perform this um, calculation or this stuff on my data, this specific calculation. So what function to use? And most of the times it does help. If not ChatGPT, you can just Google it, and you might get the answers on different forums as well. All right, so the next measure is, let's calculate the distinct count. And let's calculate the distinct count for customers. So the distinct count is essentially the unique count, and it's another DAX equation. Um, and the function for that is distinct count. So you can actually read through different functions, and you can see that this distinct returns one column table that contains distinct values in a column, which we do not want. We want the counts of the number of distinct of values in a column. Yes, that's exactly what we want. So you can pretty much read through different functions and you can decide which function to use. So right now I want the distinct count of the customers table. And just leaving customers does not help because it's asking for a specific column. So I am going to select customer ID. The reason is because it's unique, so it helps us in giving the distinct count. All right, so this measure is created. On the right hand side, you can see that the measure is created. So when you actually drop distinct count, you can see that you have 5 unique customers. I don't need this for now, so I'll just cancel it. So now that we have created a couple of measures using code, using DAX code, let's actually create a measure using the UI function. So in Power BI, you have the option of creating measure using quick calculations. So that's an inbuilt UI tool inside of Power BI with which you can build a measure. And this is not powerful for basic stuff like what I kind of showed you. It's good for statistical calculation mostly. So right now we will target the orders table, and I want to create a measure which gives us the profit. So you can see that for every specific orders in the order table, for each row, you can see that you have the revenue column and you have the cost column. And the way to calculate the profit is revenue minus cost. So that gives us the profit. So for that, we go to the playground. You can, in the menu, you can see something called a quick measure, and this is choosing a list of common calculations from the selected tables or from your given data set. So let me hit on that. You can see that the quick measure actually opens. You can suggest, you can actually use Copilot inside of Power BI, which I was just talking about. And this is in preview. This is still not in production. But this is only available if Q&A is turned on by your tenant admin. So right now, the tenancy admin which I am in is not, the Q&A feature is not turned on. So you can't use the Copilot suggestions, but if that's turned on, you can actually use it over there. However, let's just go for the standard calculations. So I need the total profit. And the way to do that is to subtract the revenue by the cost. So you have different types of calculations. You have average, filters, time intelligence, totals. Time intelligence is to work on date time. So measures which can work on date time, and I'll be showing that in a second as well. So right now we want the subtraction. You can see that the base value, so this is the initial value, and I want to subtract the revenue minus the cost. All right, let me add that as a measure. And once you do that, it creates a new measure inside of cookie types, which it should not. So let's subtract. Let's select the orders table. Let's select the revenue minus the cost. And that time I had selected the cookies type table, so it actually went and created the measure over there. So right now I've selected the orders table. Subtraction is the function which I want. So I'm subtracting the revenue by the cost, and that should give me the profit. All right, it's going and selecting the cookies table. So let's close it. Let's delete this measure. So the way to delete this measure is just click on these 3 dots and delete from model, and that essentially just deletes the measure. So let me select on orders. Let me hit on quick measure. So I hope this opens inside the orders table. I need the subtraction function, and I need to subtract the revenue by the cost. And once I hit on add, that should add the new measure, which is the revenue minus the cost. This auto generates the name. I do not want this specific name. I want the name to be profit. So I can just double click on this specific measure name, and you can edit over there. Or you can see that Power BI has actually auto generated the code, so you can actually edit the code as well. So you can change the name over here. In this case, I'm going to double click over here and change the name. So let me name this as total profit. Hit on enter. And that creates your new measure. Now let's try to visualize this. So I just take total profit, drag it and drop it. And you can see that the total profit is about is a little less than $3 million dollars. Now I want to see the total profit based on the cookie type, for example. So you have different cookies. So I need to see which is the fastest selling cookie, or which, not fastest selling, which cookie we have the most profit in. So you can see that chocolate chip is the cookie which has the highest margin for that specific business. And you can see the fortune cookie does not generate a lot of profit in total. So this is how you kind of create measures. You can do percentage as well. And essentially we'll do that right now rather than talking here. All right, so now that we have the total profit, I am not interested to see the total profit by a dollar figure. Say, for example, I want to see it by percentage. So in that case, I need to create a new measure again, because measure is a calculation. So uh, create a new measure. Let's name it as profit percentage. And I already have the total profit. So inside of a measure, you can actually refer to a previous measure as well. And in this case, we already have created total profit, which is the actual dollar figure profit. And I need to divide that by the number 100. Sorry, I need to divide that by the sum of the revenue. Yeah. So basically, I am taking the total profit into picture, and I'm going to divide that by the amount which has come in, which is the revenue from that specific order. This creates a new measure, which is profit percentage. And to visualize this, I can just drag this and drop this. And say I want the profit percentage based on the cookie types. This is a profit percentage. So let me select a table or a matrix. Let's select a matrix. So you can see that based on certain calculation, which is the total profit divided by the total revenue, you get the profit percentage for that specific cookie type. So you can see that chocolate chip has about 60% margin, sugar has about 58%, and so on. Now you can see that this is a decimal. Say, for example, you want this to not be a decimal. So you can actually, where did that measure? Yep, that's here. You can actually just select on the measure. And on the top, you can actually see that measure tools open, and that essentially is settings for your measure. So you can do a lot of stuff over here. You can change the name. You can select where it should reside, which table it should reside, and a lot of other stuff. Right now, I want to change this into percentage. So I just click on percentage, and that should do the job. So you can see that automatically from the decimal number, it has changed into a percentage now. So this way you can create a lot of measures, and you can edit measures, you can delete measures, and a lot of stuff. All right, so now that we have created a measure, let's actually try to create a calculated column. And I'll explain what the difference between this as well, when to use a measure and when to use a calculated column. All right, so now we are looking at the orders table. Let me select the table. Yep, we are looking at the orders table, and you can see that you have different features in this table, and we are interested in the revenue and the cost. And say, for example, we need to derive the profits table. So the easiest way to do that is to subtract the revenue by the cost, which we've already seen. And I want a new column now. So I select a new column. I hit on profit. And I refer to that specific column. So I need the orders table. I need the revenue minus the cost. Oops. So the revenue minus the cost should give me the profit. And once I hit on enter, that essentially should give me the new column. So you have seen that the new column is now created. And this is using DAX as well. So now that we have seen, we have used a measure and a calculated column. Now let's try to understand the difference. On the right hand side, you can see that the total profit measure is the same as the profit column which we created, or the column which we just created, which is revenue minus cost. The main difference between a measure and a calculated column is once you create a calculated column, that is calculated in the data set, and that data is stored in your PBIX file, which means it's stored as data. It is not stored as code. But once you create a measure, it does not hit the data and perform the calculation. It is just stored as code in your PBX file. And it does the calculation only when you are utilizing that measure to build visuals. So essentially this means when you have large amount of data inside of your Power BI, when you actually create a calculated column, it ends up eating a lot of space, because the calculated column performs calculations on the data, and it, whatever calculation, whatever output is generated, that is stored in your table as the data set. On the other hand, the measure is just stored as code, so it just resides as code in a dormant fashion inside your Power BI file, and it is triggered only when you are utilizing it to build a visual. So this basically means that if I have created a measure, in this case total profit, and I have not used it in the visual, then the measure, essentially data is not being affected. So it's not actually hitting the data, it's just being stored as code on the background. The second major difference is calculated column is, you can perform, you can write code for calculated column without performing any aggregations. But measures, on the other hand, usually require aggregations. And there is a reason for that, because measure is just stored as code and it is just being used for visuals. So measure is calculations on top of your data set. Calculated columns is calculation which is performed for each single row, and that is the output which is there. This is a little confusing, but yeah, you might, once you do this, you will get a understanding of it. So over here, you can see that in the calculated column code, I have subtracted the revenue by the cost, and there is no aggregation which is involved. But when I actually try to create the measure, which is total profit, you can see that I have performed an aggregation, which is sum over revenue. Basically, I've performed an aggregation and then subtracted the revenue minus the cost. So for the purposes of a demo, let me actually create a new measure, and let me just call it profit measure. And in this case, I am not going to use an aggregator. But I'll just type in the code. In fact, it doesn't even give me the option, because it knows that that's not going to work. So let me just copy and paste this. So this code which I've used, okay, forget it. Let's discard this for now. So as you can see, when your syntax is not proper inside of measure, Power BI does not leave you. So it kind of tells you that, the syntax is not proper, so I cannot store this. So let's delete this. Let me go to the calculated column which we just created. Let me just copy this code, and I am going to create a new measure using the same code. Let me paste this and
So Hale, sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
The screen is too small. I mean, hard to
Yes.
see that.
Yes. Let me zoom this.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So you can see that I am trying to subtract the revenue from the cost. And this time I'm not doing it using calculated column. I'm using a measure over here. So when you try to do that, it does not work. And essentially Power BI tells that it does not work because you cannot perform measure over a single row. You need an aggregator or you need a summation to perform that. So and you can see that it kind of gives you the error, by telling this in, right? So the way to aggregate this is by using some sort of a aggregator, and that is what we had done. So, oops. So let me put an aggregator for this as well. And you can see that now it does not give you the error. Yep, you can see that now it pretty much does not give you the error. So essentially that's the whole story of it. Let me delete this measure for now. And I have another point which is pretty important, which is calculated column is important if you're actually slicing and dicing the data. So if you say, for example, you have a certain calculation on your data set, and once you actually do that calculation, for example, profit, after that you have to analyze the table. So you have to slice and dice the data set, or you have to filter the data set and do stuff like that. In that case, calculated column does help. But if you do not need to do any slicing and dicing of the data itself, but you just want to perform calculations on the data set for the purposes of visualization only, in that case, measures are more helpful to you. And that's the whole gist of it. All right, so now let's actually create a measure which goes by row rather than going in the entire column. So right now we had seen that you have the summation and other stuff, but say for example, I need to take it row by row. So I need to go individual row by row. So say for example, I want to calculate the profit based on this table, cookie types. So the way to do that is you sum all the units sold, you sum all the revenue, you sum all the cost, you subtract the revenue by the cost, and you can multiply that by the total number of units sold. That's one way. However, that's not the best way. The best way is to subtract the revenue minus the cost per cookie, multiply that by the units sold, then go to the next row, then subtract the revenue minus the cost for this cookie, multiply that by the units sold, add the previous result with this, and so on. So the way to do that is by using SumX function. So if I go to cookie types, I create a new measure. Any questions?
I think somebody is unmuted. Can you please go on mute? If no questions.
Yep. So we have total profit for the cookie table, and the way to do that is not by using the sum, but to use the SumX function. And essentially, this is the explanation. This returns the sum of expression evaluated for each row in a specific table. So let me use this function, and this basically needs your table. So in this case, it's cookie types. And you can see that this is the syntax for it, the table followed by your actual expression. And the expression is your mathematical expression. So in this case, we want the total number of units sold. And we need to multiply that by the revenue. Let me put a bracket over here. Minus the cost. And checking for the syntax. Yep. So this is basically what we are doing. This was the syntax for that specific function. So I'm taking the unit sold and multiplying that by the revenue minus the cost. Once you hit on enter, that performs the specific calculation, and you can see that that measure is there. Essentially, in most of the cases, this gives the same result, but in certain cases where the data is skewed, the results actually differ. All right, so now let's actually create a last measure. And say, for example, I have the date column. So right now I'm going to create a date time measure. I want to find which day this specific, I want to find which day this specific order was placed. So in that case, I create a new column. I just call it day of the week. And I use the function weekday. So let's see what this function is. So this returns a number from 1 to 7. I need to give it the specific date. And in this case, it's the date column. And I need to give it a specific number. And this number essentially tells which is your first day of the week. So in this case, I want Monday to be the first day of the week. So I click on 2. And you can see that the explanation comes in IntelliSense. So once you do that, you can see that you have day of the week, and this basically gives which day of the week was that specific activity done. So I can go to the report. I can see that this page is kind of done. So I can create a new page over here, get the day of the week, and I want to see the profit, which was done. Yep. So I can see that on certain days, there was more profit than the others. So right now you can see that this does not make any sense because this is giving you the numbers. So this is on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. However, I want the actual names. So in cases like that, the best thing to do is go to ChatGPT and just tell it, um, what you exactly need. And this pretty much tells you. Was it day of the week? It's weekday, sorry. All right, and this basically tells you what to do. So you can see that it gives you a code as well. And in this case, it has used the switch. So switch is kind of like an if else statement. So I just copy this code. I paste it, and I modify this to suit what I need. And I give it the specific column. And essentially switch in DAX is nothing but an if else statement. So this is the actual expression. This is on which you are going to run your expression. And this is an if else. So if the number is 1, it's a Sunday. If the number is 2, it's a Monday, and so on. So as you can see, ChatGPT is good, but it's not perfect. So it gave you the date column, but it did not give you the number. So in this case, I can see that Sunday is the first number. So I just put that as well in the code. So it's pretty good, but it's not the best. So it's good to go to ChatGPT, go to the documentation, know some DAX as well, and do your stuff. So once I hit on enter, this should work. And you can see that the day of the week is now Saturday, Sunday, and stuff like that. So let me commit and more of this. And you can see that day of the week is actually over here. You go to the code and this should change as well. So you can see that Tuesday has the highest number of sales and Monday has the lowest number of sales for some reason. So this is essentially gives you a holistic view of your data. All right, so this is pretty much how you use DAX for creating measures and calculated columns. I think this comes more with practice. So the more you practice it with different data sets, it's better. I have taken the easiest data set possible. So creating measures were pretty easy. I will share the link to this data, but I would encourage you to connect Power BI to different data sources inside the business. Of course, after taking permissions from managers, and then try to work on Power Query and tags, and you'll get a feel of it. Any questions? Let me check the chat. Oops, somebody was too small. Anything you missed because it was too small, or any questions? I'm happy to take it now.
Not many questions this time.
Yep.
Any
All right,
questions, anyone? Okay, I guess
I think we
it's
don't have
more.
any questions.
Yeah.
So if you
So
guys need any help while you are practicing with Power BI,